The billionaire pretends to be a cleaner in his own company to find a good wife, until a maid steals his heart. You won't believe what happened next. A billionaire walked into his own company dressed as a janitor, mop in hand, name tag reading Jack. Nobody looked twice at him. Nobody except one woman. She didn't know his real name. She didn't know his real bank account. She only knew he looked tired, and she brought him coffee anyway. What she did next would end up changing both their lives forever, but not before one woman in red nearly destroyed everything. Hey, before we start, let me know, where are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels. This one is emotional, it has a twist you won't see coming, and it will remind you that the way you treat people when you think they can't help you says everything about who you really are. Let's get into it. Nobody becomes a billionaire by accident, but almost nobody becomes lonely by choice either. Nathaniel Cole had built Cole Global from a single real estate deal in Queens into a company that owned office towers in 9 cities. He was 34 years old, and on paper, his life looked like something out of a magazine. A glass penthouse over Central Park. A private plane he barely used. A fiancée named Victoria Sinclair, 33, whose photograph had appeared in 3 different society pages that year alone. But paper doesn't tell you everything. Nathaniel sat in his office on the 40th floor of Cole Tower on a Tuesday morning, staring at a wedding seating chart his future mother-in-law had emailed him at 6 a.m. 240 guests. A string quartet flown in from Vienna. A cake that cost more than most people's cars. He hadn't chosen a single flower on that chart. He hadn't chosen much of anything about his own wedding, if he was honest with himself. He had chosen Victoria, once. Or he thought he had. Their families had done business together for 15 years. Their engagement had been announced at a gala before he'd even properly proposed. His mother had practically arranged it over dinner with Victoria's father. Nathaniel told himself it was fine. Victoria was beautiful, sharp, ambitious. She knew how to work a room. She never embarrassed him in public. But lately, a question kept surfacing in his mind, one he couldn't shake. Did Victoria love him, or did she love what came with him? He thought about his father, who had died 6 years earlier, a man who used to say that you learn everything about a person by watching how they treat a waiter, a janitor, a stranger who can do nothing for them. His father had built the company from nothing, working nights as a security guard while he saved for his first small property. He never forgot where he came from, and he never let Nathaniel forget it either. Nathaniel hadn't tested that lesson on Victoria. Not really. Not properly. She was always polished around his family, his board, his friends. But something in his gut told him that polish and character were 2 very different things. That afternoon, he made a decision that would have shocked every person on his board of directors, had any of them known about it. He called his assistant, Marcus, into his office and closed the door. "I need you to do something for me," Nathaniel said. "And I need you to not ask why." Marcus had worked for Nathaniel for 9 years. He'd learned not to ask why a long time ago. "Okay," he said carefully. "What do you need?" "I want a job. On the cleaning crew. Here, in this building. Under a different name." Marcus blinked. "You want to clean your own building?" "I want to disappear for a while," Nathaniel said. "I want to walk through my own company the way nobody like me ever gets to walk through it. I want to see how people really are when they think no one important is watching." "And Victoria?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "Victoria doesn't need to know." 3 days later, a new hire joined the overnight to morning custodial team on the lower floors of Cole Tower. His name tag read Jack Turner. He wore a grey uniform, a baseball cap pulled low, and a pair of glasses he didn't need. He'd shaved off the neatly trimmed beard he wore in every photograph the press had ever taken of him, and let his hair grow messier than his stylist would ever have allowed. Nobody recognized the billionaire in the man pushing a mop bucket down the 12th floor hallway at 6 in the morning. Nobody except, in a strange way no one could have predicted, one woman named Grace Bennett. Grace was 32, and she had worked the cleaning shift at Coal Tower for almost 3 years. She started at 5 a.m. so she could pick up her daughter Lily from her sister's apartment by 3 in the afternoon. She'd been up since 4 that first morning Jack arrived, and she was the one who showed him where the supply closet was, how the industrial floor buffer on the 9th floor liked to jam if you didn't hold the handle just right, which vending machine ate your dollar bills. "You're new," she said, handing him a spare pair of work gloves from her own bag because his hadn't come in yet. "First week's always the hardest. You get used to it." "Thanks," Nathaniel said, genuinely surprised by the gesture. Nobody in his life handed him things without expecting something back. "I appreciate that. Don't mention it." She smiled, quick and easy, already moving on to the next task. "We look out for each other around here. Nobody else is gonna do it for us." He watched her disappear down the hallway with her cart, whistling something under her breath, and he felt something strange settle in his chest. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was closer to relief. Like he'd been holding his breath for years without realizing it, and for one small moment, in the presence of a stranger who had no idea who he was, he could finally exhale. He didn't know it yet, but that small kindness, a pair of borrowed gloves, freely given, was about to change the direction of his entire life. The first week undercover taught Nathaniel more about his own company than 4 years of board meetings ever had. He learned that the security guard on the night shift, a heavy-set man named Otis, kept a photograph of his granddaughter taped inside his locker and talked about her every single day like she'd just been born, even though she was 11. He learned that half the janitorial staff hadn't received a raise in 2 years, even though Coal Global's stock had climbed 30% in that same window. He learned that the executives on the top floors rarely said good morning to anyone pushing a cart, and some didn't even make eye contact. And he learned that Grace Bennett was, without question, the kindest person he had ever met. She never complained, even when her back ached from hauling supplies up 9 flights because the freight elevator was down for maintenance. She knew the names of every security guard, every barista in the lobby coffee stand, every executive assistant who worked past dark. She kept peppermints in her cart pocket and gave them to anyone who looked like they were having a hard day. She talked about her daughter Lily with a kind of glow that made Nathaniel, a man who had negotiated 8-figure deals without blinking, feel unexpectedly emotional. "She wants to be a marine biologist," Grace told him one morning, over cheap coffee in the break room on the 3rd floor, the only place low enough in the building that neither of them thought twice about being seen there. 6 years old and she already knows more about octopuses than I know about anything." "That's impressive," Nathaniel said. "She's smart. Smarter than me." Grace laughed, but there was something underneath it, something tired. "I want to give her everything. I'm working toward my nursing certificate at night, online classes, whenever I can manage it after Lily's asleep. It's slow, but it's something." "What happened to her father?" Nathaniel asked, then immediately worried he'd overstepped. Grace's expression didn't harden, exactly, but it changed. "He left when she was 2. Said he wasn't ready to be a dad. I don't talk about him much. Doesn't matter anymore. Me and Lily, we're a team. That's enough." Nathaniel thought about Victoria in that moment, about the conversations they'd had, or hadn't had, about children, about the future, about anything real. Victoria talked about the wedding venue, the guest list, the photographer they needed to book a year in advance. She had never once asked him what he wanted his life to actually feel like. Grace, a woman who owned nothing close to what Victoria owned, had built an entire life out of love and stubborn hope, and she'd done it without anyone handing her a single thing. Over the following 2 weeks, Jack and Grace fell into an easy rhythm. They took their breaks at the same time. She teased him for being clumsy with the floor buffer. He started bringing her a coffee some mornings, the good kind, from the shop across the street, telling her he'd gotten a gift card from a friend when she asked how he could afford it on a janitor's paycheck. She never pried too hard. She simply accepted him as he was, no questions, no agenda. Meanwhile, on the 40th floor, Nathaniel Cole's absence was becoming a small but noticeable pattern. Marcus fielded calls from the board, telling them Nathaniel was dealing with a personal matter and would be reachable by email only. Victoria noticed too, though in her own way. "You've been distracted lately," she said to him one evening, when he'd slipped away from the cleaning crew early to meet her for a dinner he almost forgot was on the calendar. She said it while checking her phone, not quite looking at him. "Is everything okay with the merger?" "Everything's fine," Nathaniel said. "Good. Because the Kensington Group is going to be at the engagement gala next month, and I need you sharp. This wedding is going to put us on a completely different level, socially. My mother already has 3 photographers confirmed." Nathaniel watched her across the table, perfectly dressed, perfectly poised, talking about his wedding like it was a corporate merger of its own. He thought about Grace's laugh in the break room that morning, unguarded and real, and the gap between the two women felt, for the first time, impossible to ignore. "Victoria," he started, "do you ever think about what our life is actually going to look like? Not the wedding. After." She finally looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, mornings. Regular days. Do you ever picture it?" She laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "Nathaniel, we're going to have staff for the regular days. That's the whole point of what we've built." She reached over and patted his hand like she was reassuring a nervous child. "Don't overthink it. Everything is going to be perfect." He smiled because it was expected of him, but something in his chest went cold. 2 days later, Victoria called to let him know she'd be stopping by Cole Tower personally to inspect the atrium on the 40th floor, where the engagement gala would be held in a few weeks. She wanted to check on the renovations herself, she said. She wanted everything to be flawless. Nathaniel, still deep in his disguise, still unaware of exactly how that visit would unfold, had no idea that Victoria Sinclair was about to walk directly into the one place where her mask would finally slip, in front of the one man who could no longer look away from what he saw. The morning Victoria arrived at Cole Tower, Grace was assigned to the 40th floor for the first time in weeks, covering for a co-worker who had called in sick. Nathaniel, still jacked to everyone around him, was there too, mopping a hallway near the atrium where the renovation crew had left a mess of drywall dust and spilled paint. He didn't think anything of it when he heard heels clicking against marble, sharp and fast, the sound of someone who walked like she owned the building. He didn't even look up right away. It was only when the voice cut through the air, cold and commanding, that his whole body went still. "Excuse me. Whoever is in charge of this floor, I need someone immediately." It was Victoria. Nathaniel's stomach dropped. He kept his head low, cap pulled down, pretending to focus on the mop in his hands, praying she wouldn't look at him directly. In 3 years together, had she ever really looked at him without also looking at what he represented? He was about to find out just how invisible the help really was to her. Victoria swept past him without a single glance, her assistant trailing behind her with a tablet, rattling off details about floral arrangements and lighting rigs. She stopped near the atrium centerpiece, a marble fountain the renovation crew had just finished installing, and frowned. "This water feature is completely wrong. I specifically said champagne-colored stone, not this beige." She turned, sharp, and her eyes landed on the nearest person in a uniform, who happened to be Nathaniel. "You. Is there someone who actually knows what they're doing on this project?" I just handle the floors," Nathaniel said, disguising his voice as best he could, keeping his eyes down. "Unbelievable." Victoria exhaled sharply and turned to grab a glass pitcher of orange juice sitting on a nearby catering table, meant for the renovation crew's breakfast. She was already furious about the stone, about the timeline, about a florist who'd apparently cancelled that morning, and in that single overwhelmed, entitled moment, something in her simply snapped. "You people," she said, voice rising, loud enough that heads turned across the atrium, "can't get anything right. Do you have any idea how much money is riding on this event? Do you understand who is going to be here?" I really don't have anything to do with the..." She didn't let him finish. In one furious motion, She tipped the pitcher and poured the entire contents of orange juice down the front of his uniform, drenching him from shoulder to boot. Gasps rippled through the hallway. A few renovation workers froze mid-task. Nathaniel stood there, juice dripping off his fingertips, stunned into complete silence, not from the humiliation, though that stung plenty, but from the sheer, blinding clarity of what he had just witnessed. This was Victoria. This was who she really was, when she believed no one who mattered was watching. "Consider that a wake-up call," Victoria snapped, tossing the empty pitcher onto the table like it was nothing. "Fix the fountain by Thursday, or I'll have your supervisor fired along with you." She turned on her heel and walked away, already back on the phone with the florist, as if nothing had happened at all. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then Grace, who had witnessed the entire thing from the supply closet doorway a few feet away, dropped the box of cleaning supplies in her hands and rushed forward. Hey, are you okay?" She grabbed a stack of paper towels off the catering table without hesitation and started dabbing at his soaked shirt, her face tight with anger. That was completely uncalled for. Who does she think she is? "I'm fine," Nathaniel said quietly, still trying to process the moment. "Really, I'm fine." "You are not fine. You're covered in orange juice because some woman had a bad morning." Grace glared in the direction Victoria had disappeared. "I don't care how much money someone has. That doesn't give them the right to treat people like they're nothing. You hear me? You are not nothing." Something in Nathaniel's chest cracked wide open. He had spent his whole life surrounded by people who wanted something from him: his money, his name, his influence. And here was a woman with far less than almost anyone he knew, standing in a hallway defending a man she believed was a broke janitor, simply because it was the right thing to do. "Thank you," he managed to say. "I mean it. Thank you." "Come on," Grace said, gently steering him toward the break room. "Let's get you cleaned up before that stains permanently. I've got a spare shirt in my locker, might be a little big on you, but it beats walking around sticky all day." As they walked away together, Nathaniel glanced back once at the fountain, at the spilled orange juice pooling on the marble floor, and understood with total certainty that everything in his life was about to change. He just didn't yet know how much. The break room on the 3rd floor smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, but to Nathaniel, in that moment, it felt like the safest place in the entire building. Grace handed him a faded grey t-shirt from her locker. It read Bennett Family Reunion 2019 across the front in peeling letters, and turned around politely while he changed out of his ruined uniform shirt in the corner. "Sorry, it's not exactly designer," she said, a small attempt at humor. "It's perfect," Nathaniel said, and he meant it more than she could possibly know. She handed him a mug of coffee, poured from the ancient machine in the corner, and sat across from him at the scratched plastic table. "You want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps." Nathaniel turned the mug slowly in his hands. "It's not the first time someone's treated me like I don't matter," he said carefully, choosing his words. "But it's the first time it's ever really hit me how normal that is for some people. Every single day." Grace nodded slowly. "When I first started here, one of the executives on the 20th floor used to leave his coffee cup on the floor next to the trash can instead of in it. Every single day. Like it was too much effort to lift his arm 6 more inches. I used to go home furious." She shrugged. "You learn to let it roll off you. Mostly. Some days it's harder than others." "How do you do it?" "Stay so kind, I mean, when people treat you like that." She considered the question seriously, like it deserved a real answer. "Because I decided a long time ago that the way someone treats me doesn't get to decide who I am. That woman today, whoever she was, she's going to go home and forget this happened by dinner. But I get to go home to my daughter and tell her I helped someone today instead of letting someone make me smaller. That matters more to me than her opinion ever will." Nathaniel stared at her, and for a long moment, he couldn't speak at all. He thought about every gala, every board meeting, every carefully curated event in his adult life, and he couldn't remember the last time anyone had said something so simply, unguardedly true to him. "You're a remarkable person, Grace," he said quietly. She laughed, waving it off, a little embarrassed. "I'm just a mom trying to get through her shift. Don't go making me sound like a saint, Jack. I still yell at the vending machine when it eats my dollar." They sat together a while longer, talking about nothing important: her nursing classes, Lily's obsession with octopuses, a new noodle place that had opened 2 blocks from Cole Tower that Grace couldn't afford to try yet but had been eyeing on her walk to the train. Nathaniel found himself laughing more in that half hour than he had in months. Eventually, his phone buzzed in the pocket of his uniform pants, a burner phone Marcus had set up for Jack Turner, and he glanced down to see a text. "Marcus. Board wants a call at 2 p.m. Can't stall much longer. You need to check in as yourself soon." Reality came rushing back in. He excused himself, telling Grace he had to get back to his cart, and made his way toward the service elevator, still wearing her old family reunion t-shirt beneath his replacement uniform jacket. He never made it to the elevator without incident. Marcus was waiting for him near the service stairwell, phone in hand, looking anxious. "Nathaniel, we have a problem. The Kensington deal is moving up, they want to close by Friday, and I can't keep making excuses for why you're unreachable. You need to." "Marcus." Nathaniel's voice was sharp, urgent. "Not here. Not by my." Too late. A junior associate, an ambitious young woman named Priya from the legal department, rounded the corner at exactly the wrong moment, catching just enough of the sentence to freeze mid-step, her eyes darting between Marcus and the janitor he'd just addressed by his actual first name. "Mr. Cole," she said, uncertain, staring at Nathaniel's face beneath the cap. Are you?" Nathaniel's heart pounded. 3 weeks of careful anonymity, 1 syllable away from unraveling in a stairwell. "You must be mistaken," he said quickly, forcing his voice into something unfamiliar, praying it would work. "Name's Jack. I clean floors around here, that's about it." Priya blinked, glancing at Marcus, who forced an awkward, unconvincing laugh. Yeah, no, sorry, Priya, this is Jack. New hire. Guess he's got one of those faces, huh?" He practically shoved Nathaniel toward the stairwell door. "Get back to it, Jack, don't want you falling behind on schedule." The moment the stairwell door shut behind them, Marcus exhaled hard. That was too close. "Nathaniel, you need to think about how much longer you're doing this. The board is asking questions. Victoria is asking questions. This can't go on forever." Nathaniel leaned against the cold concrete wall, still smelling faintly of orange juice beneath Grace's borrowed shirt, and thought about her laugh in the break room, her fierce defense of a stranger, the honest ache in her voice when she talked about her daughter's future. "A little longer," he said quietly. "I just need a little longer." He didn't know it yet, but the clock had already started running out. Over the next 10 days, Nathaniel found himself counting the hours until his shifts overlapped with Grace's. It surprised him how quickly his priorities had shifted. Board calls that once consumed his entire focus now felt like distractions from the version of his life he actually looked forward to. Trading easy jokes with Grace over the industrial coffee machine, learning the names of her favorite childhood books so he could recommend them to Lily, watching the way her whole face changed when she talked about the future she was building, slowly, one online nursing course at a time. He learned that Grace's mother had passed away when Grace was 19, that she'd raised her younger sister Denise practically on her own for 2 years after that, working 2 jobs to keep them both fed. He learned that Denise now worked alongside her on the cleaning crew. The 2 of them had applied together 3 years ago, a package deal, sisters looking out for each other the way they always had. "People think being poor means you don't have dreams," Grace told him one afternoon, sitting on an overturned bucket in the supply closet while they waited out a sudden downpour that had flooded the loading dock entrance. "That's not true. You have just as many dreams as anyone else. You just have less time and less money to chase them. That's the only difference." "What's your biggest one?" Nathaniel asked. "Your dream, I mean. Beyond the nursing certificate." Grace thought about it, tracing a crack in the concrete floor with the toe of her sneaker. I want to open a little clinic someday. Nothing fancy. Somewhere in my old neighborhood, where people can't afford real healthcare, where kids like me and Denise grew up without anyone checking if we were okay. I want Lily to grow up seeing her mom build something that actually helps people. She laughed a little, self-conscious. Big dream for a lady who cleans toilets for a living, huh? It's not big, Nathaniel said. It's exactly the right size. The world needs more people who think like that. She looked at him for a long moment, something soft and searching in her expression. You're different than most guys I've met, Jack. You actually listen. Most people just wait for their turn to talk. Nathaniel felt the weight of his lie settle heavier on his chest than it had in weeks. Every day, the gap between who Grace believed he was and who he actually was grew wider, and every day, it became harder to imagine closing that gap without losing her trust completely. Meanwhile, on the 40th floor, the machinery of the wedding, and now the engagement gala, scheduled for just 11 days away, ground forward without him. Victoria had taken over almost every planning detail herself, and her demands had grown sharper, more exacting, as the date approached. She'd fired the florist entirely and hired a new one flown in from California. She'd sent Nathaniel 4 separate emails about seating arrangements he hadn't read. She had not, notably, asked once how he was doing, whether he was stressed, whether he even wanted the wedding to look the way she'd designed it. You seem exhausted lately, she said to him during one of their rare dinners together, the first time she'd looked at him properly in almost 2 weeks. Are you sleeping? You look thinner. I've had a lot on my mind, Nathaniel admitted. Well, don't let it show at the gala. The Kensington family will be there, half the city council, both our families. Everything needs to be perfect. She sipped her wine, studying him over the rim of the glass. Nathaniel, is something going on with you? You've been distant for weeks. It was, he realized, the closest she had come to actually asking him a real question in months. For one brief moment, he considered telling her everything, about Jack, about the cleaning crew, about the orange juice, about Grace. He wanted, desperately, to see whether there was anything underneath the polish, whether she would understand, whether she would even care. I've just been under a lot of pressure with the Kensington deal, he said instead, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. Victoria nodded, satisfied with the explanation, and moved on to describing the string quartet set list for the gala. Later that night, lying awake in his penthouse, Nathaniel finally admitted to himself what he had been avoiding for weeks. He could not marry Victoria Sinclair. Not because of the orange juice, not entirely. Because somewhere in the past month, he had learned what it actually felt like to be seen, not for his money, not for his name, but for himself, and he could not go back to a life without that feeling now that he knew what it was. The only question left was what to do about it, and how much time he had left before the truth came out on its own. The trouble started, as trouble often does, with jealousy dressed up as professionalism. Victoria arrived at Cole Tower again 8 days before the gala, this time to inspect the final floral arrangements with her new California florist in tow. She spotted Nathaniel, still Jack, near the atrium, laughing with Grace over something on his phone, a video of Lily attempting, and hilariously failing, to identify different species of jellyfish for a school project. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She didn't recognize him, of course. She had barely looked at his face during the orange juice incident, and even less since. But she recognized the dynamic instantly. Familiarity, warmth, and ease between two people that reminded her uncomfortably of things she and Nathaniel hadn't shared in a long time. It needled something in her, though she couldn't have said exactly what, or why she cared at all about a janitor's friendships. She found the floor supervisor, a nervous man named Gerald, within the hour. That cleaning woman near the atrium, Victoria said, not bothering to learn Grace's name. The one who's always chatting instead of working. I want her reassigned to a different floor. Somewhere I won't have to see unprofessional behavior when I'm here for wedding business. Gerald, terrified of upsetting the future Mrs. Cole, didn't argue. By the next morning, Grace found herself reassigned to the basement level, cleaning the parking garage and mechanical rooms, a demotion in every way but title, with fewer hours and a schedule that no longer aligned with picking up Lily on time. "I don't understand," Grace told Denise in the break room, quiet and confused, holding the reassignment slip in her hand. "I've never gotten a single complaint in 3 years. Gerald wouldn't even give me a reason." Nathaniel found out an hour later, and something in him went cold with fury, not at Gerald, who was simply following orders, but at Victoria, who had clearly done this out of nothing but petty spite, without even bothering to learn the name of the woman whose life she was disrupting. He wanted to march up to the 40th floor and end the engagement on the spot. But he knew, with painful clarity, that revealing himself now, in anger, in the middle of chaos, 8 days before a gala 240 guests were already flying in for, would only create a mess that would hurt Grace more than it helped her. The tabloids would descend. Her privacy, her daughter's privacy, would be destroyed overnight. He needed to be smarter than his anger. So he did the only thing he could think to do without revealing his identity. He acted quietly, from the shadows, the way his father used to before Cole Global became a household name. He asked Marcus to set up an anonymous scholarship fund through the company's charitable foundation, one specifically designated for working parents pursuing nursing and healthcare certifications, dispersed through a third-party organization with no visible connection to Cole Global's executive team. He made sure Grace's name was one of the first submitted for review, though he insisted the selection process remained genuinely blind and competitive, refusing to simply hand it to her outright. She had to earn it on the merits of her application, same as anyone else. He wanted that much to be true, even if nothing else about their story currently was. He also quietly instructed Gerald, through Marcus and without explanation, to reverse Grace's reassignment, citing a scheduling correction that conveniently avoided naming Victoria at all. 2 days later, Grace found an email waiting in her inbox, informing her she'd been selected as one of 12 recipients nationwide for the newly launched Cole Foundation Nursing Advancement Scholarship, covering the full remaining cost of her certification program. She read it 3 times before she believed it was real. Then she found Jack mopping near the loading dock and threw her arms around him without warning, laughing and crying at the same time. "I got it," she said, breathless. "The scholarship. I actually got it, Jack. Lily's going to be so proud." Nathaniel held her, careful, restrained, feeling the full weight of everything he still hadn't told her pressing against his ribs. "I knew you would," he said quietly. "You worked for it. Nobody handed you anything." "I have to tell someone," Grace said, wiping her eyes, laughing at herself. "I don't even know who runs that foundation, but if I ever meet them, I'm going to hug them exactly like this." Nathaniel forced a smile, even as guilt twisted sharp in his chest. He was running out of time, out of disguises, out of reasons to keep hiding the truth from the one person who had shown him, without even trying, exactly what honesty was supposed to look like. Nathaniel visited his grandmother, Eleanor Cole, 4 days before the gala. She lived alone in the same modest brownstone in Brooklyn where his father had grown up, refusing every offer Nathaniel had ever made to move her somewhere grander. She was 81 years old, sharp as a blade, and the only person left alive who had known his father as a young man scraping together his first down payment. "You look terrible," she said, by way of greeting, ushering him into her cramped kitchen and putting on a kettle. "Sit. Tell me what's wrong." Nathaniel told her everything: the disguise, the orange juice, Grace, the scholarship, the gala looming 4 days away, the wedding looming after that. Eleanor listened without interrupting once, pouring 2 cups of tea with steady hands. When he finished, she set her cup down and looked at him with an expression he remembered from childhood, the one that meant she was about to say something he needed to hear whether he wanted to or not. "Your father used to say a person's character is a house," she said. "You can paint the outside however you like, put whatever furniture you want in the front room where guests can see it. But eventually, someone's going to walk into the back rooms, the ones nobody decorates for company. That's where you find out who somebody really is." She reached over and patted his hand. You already know what you found in Victoria's back rooms, Nathaniel. The question is why you're still standing at her front door. I'm scared of what happens when I tell the truth, Nathaniel admitted quietly. Grace is going to feel like I lied to her for weeks. Because I did. Even if my reasons made sense to me, they might not make sense to her. Probably not, at first, Eleanor agreed, unflinching. She has every right to be hurt. But there's a difference between a lie that protects you and a lie that was searching for something true. You didn't disguise yourself to trick anyone out of anything. You did it because you were desperate to find one honest person in your life. That matters. It won't erase the hurt, but it matters. Nathaniel left his grandmother's brownstone that evening with more clarity than he'd had in weeks, but not necessarily more courage. He knew what he had to do. He still didn't know how to do it without breaking something irreplaceable. He got his chance to prepare sooner than expected, and not on his own terms. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency meeting with the gala's event coordinator, and Nathaniel, still disguised, happened to be assigned to polish the atrium's marble floors nearby while they worked. He wasn't eavesdropping intentionally, but he couldn't help overhearing when Victoria's voice sharpened. I don't care what the janitor said, I want that fountain repainted before Saturday, she snapped into her phone, pacing near the windows. And another thing, there's a woman on the cleaning staff who's been getting far too comfortable around here. Brown hair, always smiling like she owns the place. I want her nowhere near the gala floor Saturday night. I don't need the help getting familiar with our guests. Nathaniel's grip tightened on the mop handle. She was talking about Grace again, and this time aiming to keep her not just off one floor, but entirely away from the event, likely costing her the overtime pay she'd been counting on for weeks. Something in him hardened into resolve. He found Marcus that afternoon and told him the plan. I'm ending it with Victoria before the gala, not after. And I'm telling Grace the truth myself, before anyone else can do it for me, or before she hears some twisted version of it from someone else. Nathaniel, the gala is in 3 days. The whole board, the Kensington family, half the press in this city will be there. If you do this publicly. I know exactly what it will look like, Nathaniel said. But I'm done letting Victoria hurt people because she thinks no one important is watching. And I'm done lying to the one person who's been honest with me from the very beginning. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Then let's figure out how to do this the right way, not just the honest way, but a way that actually protects Grace, too. She deserves better than finding out in front of 200 strangers. Nathaniel agreed, and together they began quietly planning exactly how the truth would come out, carefully, deliberately, on his terms rather than Victoria's or the tabloids. But plans, as Nathaniel was about to learn, rarely survive contact with Victoria Sinclair when she feels something slipping out of her control. The night of the engagement gala arrived with 240 guests, a live string quartet, a marble fountain finally painted the correct shade of champagne, and a tension in the air that only 2 people in the entire atrium could feel. Nathaniel had planned to speak with Grace privately before the event began, to finally tell her the truth in a quiet corner away from cameras and crowds. But the schedule collapsed under him almost immediately. Marcus needed him for a last-minute Kensington group conversation, then his mother pulled him aside for photographs, then Victoria's coordinator needed him to approve the seating chart one final time. By the time the first guests arrived, he still hadn't found 5 uninterrupted minutes. Grace, meanwhile, had been added back onto the event staff after all, not by Victoria's choice, but because 2 other servers had called out sick and Gerald, in a panic, pulled every available hand onto the floor, Grace included. She moved through the crowd in a crisp black uniform, carrying trays of champagne, careful and professional, entirely unaware that the man she knew as Jack was standing 30 feet away in a tailored tuxedo, being congratulated by strangers on his upcoming wedding. It was Denise, working the same shift, who spotted him first from across the room and went pale. "Grace," she whispered, pulling her sister aside near the kitchen doors. "That man over there, in the black tux, by the fountain. Doesn't he look exactly like Jack? Grace laughed it off at first. Denise, half the men here look like every other man here in a tuxedo. That's not, she stopped mid-sentence, following her sister's gaze, and felt something cold drop through her stomach. It was him. The same jaw, the same eyes, the same small scar above his eyebrow she'd noticed once while cleaning up his orange juice-soaked shirt weeks ago. Without the cap, without the glasses, without the uniform, but unmistakably him. Before Grace could process what she was seeing, the moment fractured further. Victoria, sweeping through the atrium in a deep red gown, spotted Grace's tray drifting slightly too close to a cluster of Kensington executives and, without a second hesitation, reverted instantly to the version of herself she'd shown weeks earlier by the fountain. "You," she snapped, loud enough for a dozen heads to turn. "I specifically said you were not to work this floor tonight. Do you have any idea who is standing 3 feet from you? Put that tray down and get back to the kitchen before you embarrass this entire event." "I'm sorry, Gerald asked me to cover." "I don't care what Gerald asked," Victoria cut in, her voice climbing, drawing more eyes by the second. "This is exactly the kind of unprofessional mess I was trying to avoid. Some people simply don't understand where they belong." The words landed like a slap, sharp and public, and Grace felt her face burn with humiliation in front of a room full of strangers in designer gowns and tailored suits. She had weathered plenty of hard days in 3 years at Cole Tower, but never anything quite this cruel, this deliberately staged in front of an audience. And that was the exact moment Nathaniel Cole could no longer stay silent. "Victoria, that's enough." Nathaniel's voice cut across the atrium, steady and unmistakably commanding, the voice of a man who had run boardroom negotiations worth billions of dollars. The string quartet faltered mid-note. Conversations died out in a slow, spreading wave as guests turned to see the future groom crossing the marble floor with a purpose that silenced the entire room. "Nathaniel, this doesn't concern you," Victoria said, startled but recovering quickly, forcing a tight smile for the watching crowd. "It's a small staffing issue, nothing to." "It concerns me completely," Nathaniel said, stopping directly beside Grace, who stared at him now with an expression caught somewhere between shock and dawning, devastating realization. "Because this woman is not staff you get to humiliate for your own entertainment. And because 3 weeks ago, I was standing exactly where she's standing now, wearing a uniform just like hers, when you poured an entire pitcher of orange juice over my head without bothering to ask a single question first." A gasp rippled outward through the crowd. Victoria's face went white, then quickly, furiously red. "What are you talking about? That's absurd, that never." "It happened right there," Nathaniel said, gesturing toward the fountain. "By that exact fountain, in front of a dozen witnesses who are probably still in this building tonight. My name is Jack Turner. Or rather, it wasn't. It was me. I spent the last month working the cleaning crew of my own company, undercover, because I needed to know the truth about the woman I was about to marry. And I found it. Twice." The room had gone completely, deathly silent, save for a few scattered whispers rippling toward the back. Nathaniel's mother pressed a hand to her mouth near the front row. Marcus stood near the doorway, tense, ready to intervene if needed, but holding back to let this unfold exactly as Nathaniel had chosen. "You've been lying to me for a month." Victoria's voice cracked, humiliation and fury tangled together as 240 guests watched her unravel in real time. "You made me look like a fool in front of everyone I know." "No, Victoria." Nathaniel's voice was quiet now, almost gentle, though it carried across the silent room with terrible clarity. "You did that yourself. I just happened to be standing close enough to see it." He turned to face her fully, guests parting instinctively around them. "I can't marry someone who treats people like they're disposable the moment she thinks it's safe to do so. I'm sorry it has to happen this way, in front of everyone. But I would rather you know the truth publicly than let it hide behind closed doors for the rest of our lives." Victoria stared at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation, finding none. Without another word, she turned and stormed toward the exit, her mother rushing after her, the crowd whispering furiously in her wake. Nathaniel turned back to Grace, who had gone very still, tears standing in her eyes, her tray of champagne glasses forgotten on a nearby table. "Grace, I need you to know." "Don't." Her voice shook, quiet but sharp, cutting through his sentence entirely. "Don't stand there in your tuxedo and explain to me how this was all for some greater purpose. I spent weeks telling you things I don't tell anyone. I hugged you. I cried in front of you because I got that scholarship. Was that a test too? Was I part of some experiment for you?" "No. Grace, please." "I need to go home," she said, cutting him off, wiping her eyes fiercely, refusing to let them fall in front of 200 strangers. "My shift is over." She turned and walked out of the atrium, past Denise, past the stunned kitchen staff, past every guest still frozen in shocked silence, and did not look back once. Nathaniel stood alone in the middle of the fountain's soft light, watching the woman he loved disappear through the doors, understanding with sudden, gut-wrenching clarity that ending things with Victoria had been the easy part. Winning back Grace's trust, earning it honestly, this time, was going to be an entirely different battle. Nathaniel didn't chase her that night. He understood, painfully, that Grace needed space more than she needed another grand gesture from a man who had already given her plenty of surprises for one lifetime. Instead, he waited 3 days. 3 days of the tabloids running headlines about the billionaire's secret double life. 3 days of his mother alternating between fury and reluctant, grudging respect. 3 days of the board demanding meetings he barely paid attention to. None of it mattered to him half as much as the silence from Grace, who had not shown up for her next scheduled shift and hadn't returned a single voicemail. On the 4th day, Nathaniel drove himself, no driver, no assistant, to the address Marcus had reluctantly pulled from her employment file, a modest apartment building in Sunset Park with a bodega on the corner and a bright yellow bike chained outside that could only have belonged to a 6-year-old girl obsessed with the ocean. He knocked, holding nothing but himself. No flowers, no jewelry, no grand offer. He'd learned enough from Grace in the past month to know none of that would matter if the words underneath it weren't honest. Denise opened the door, arms crossed, clearly having appointed herself as gatekeeper. "You've got some nerve," she said, though there was less heat in it than he expected. "I know," Nathaniel said. "I'm not here to fix everything in one conversation. I just need 5 minutes. If she wants me to leave after that, I will, and I won't come back unless she asks me to." A long pause. Then Grace appeared behind her sister, Lily peeking curiously around her legs, and Denise stepped aside, muttering something about getting the girl ready for bed as she retreated. Grace didn't invite him in. She stepped out onto the small landing, arms wrapped around herself, waiting. "I'm not going to pretend the lie didn't hurt you," Nathaniel started. "Because I know it did. And I know saying sorry doesn't erase a month of you not knowing who you were really talking to. But I need you to understand something. Everything I felt in that break room, on my breaks with you, learning about Lily, about your nursing classes, about the clinic you want to build someday, none of that was part of a test. That's just who I actually am, underneath everything else. You didn't fall for a disguise, Grace. You met the realest version of me that's existed in years." Grace's eyes glistened, but she stayed quiet, listening. "I went undercover because I was terrified I'd spend my whole life surrounded by people who only saw my money," he continued. "And then I met someone who handed me work gloves without knowing I could buy the entire factory that made them. That wasn't a test I passed or failed. That was the moment I remembered what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of a bank account. I fell in love with you because of who you are, not despite it, and definitely not because of some experiment." "And the scholarship," Grace said quietly, finally speaking. "Was that real? Or did you just buy my gratitude?" "You earned that scholarship on merit. Through a blind selection process I made sure I had no control over," Nathaniel said. "I only made sure your application landed on the pile. Everything after that was entirely you. It always has been entirely you, Grace. That's the whole point I'm trying to make." Grace was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the porch light, searching for whatever it was she needed to see. "I need time," she finally said. "Not forever. Just time. This is a lot, Nathaniel. Learning your actual name is a lot." "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. And Grace, whatever you decide, that scholarship stays yours. Your clinic stays your dream. None of that was ever conditional on us." She nodded slowly, something in her shoulders finally loosening, just slightly. "Good night, Nathaniel." It took 2 more months. 2 months of him showing up, not with gifts, but with consistency. Coffee left quietly at her new nursing school's front desk on exam days, an offer to help move Denise into a bigger apartment that he made through the moving company rather than his own checkbook, patient distance whenever she needed it, patient presence whenever she didn't. Slowly, carefully, trust rebuilt itself, brick by honest brick. By the following spring, Grace had finished her certification. She took a job at a community health clinic in her old neighborhood, exactly the kind of place she'd always dreamed about, and Nathaniel quietly funded an expansion of the clinic's pediatric wing. Not in his name, not for credit, simply because it mattered to her, and because now, it mattered to him too. Lily, for her part, adjusted to Nathaniel's presence the way children often do, with far less drama than the adults around her. She started calling him Jack as a running joke long after everyone else had stopped, and eventually landed on Nate, delivered with the easy affection of a kid who'd simply decided he belonged in her life. There was no fairy tale wedding, no 240 guests, no string quartet flown in from Vienna. When Nathaniel finally proposed, almost a year after that gala, it was in the small kitchen of Grace's apartment, Lily fast asleep down the hall, nothing but a simple ring and an honest question. If there's one thing this story leaves behind, it's this. The truest measure of anyone's character isn't how they treat the people who can do something for them. It's how they treat the people who can't. Kindness costs nothing, but it reveals everything. And sometimes, the most powerful love story isn't found in the boardroom or the ballroom. It's found in a break room, over a cup of bad coffee, between 2 people who simply chose to be honest with each other when it would have been so much easier to lie. If this story moved you even a little, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you want more stories just like this one, and share it with someone in your life who could use a reminder tonight that kindness always finds its way back around. Thank you for watching until the very end. I'll see you in the next story.